Hello, my name is Sargon Morad, and this is my 15-minute long tutorial on Microsoft Azure Store Simple. So what I'd like to do over the next 15 minutes is go over the Store Simple solution and the typical storage challenges in customer environments today, talk about what the Store Simple benefits are, go over the solution itself specifically, and look at the use cases and how disaster recovery works. And then I'll go over, the steps I took in a demo, and then I'll actually show you in the Azure portal, my configured demo. The Store Simple solution is comprised of two key components, and this is the Store Simple storage array and the Microsoft Azure Cloud. Together, this solution allows customers to, better manage their data growth and lower their storage costs. It allows them to simplify, data protection and disaster recovery needs, and it helps them to increase their agility and make them more dynamic with respect to the storage needs in their environment. The Store Simple solution, is designed to address multiple different storage needs within an environment. So everything from primary storage to disk-based backup, right on through to tape backup and DR. Let's spend a few moments and talk about what happens to data in the enterprise over time. When data first gets created, it's high value and high access, and as time moves forward, the value and the access of that data decreases. And essentially, data falls into two categories. And there is a working set of data and an inactive data set. And typically, this follows, the size of these two sets follow the 80-20 rule, in that, 80% of the data in an environment is considered inactive, and 20% is the part that's considered the working set. And Store Simple, in a traditional storage environment, the user has to buy enough storage to address both of these sets together, even though it's only the working set of data that gets accessed the majority amount of the time. You can leverage the Store Simple hardware component for that working set of data, and because it integrates natively into Microsoft Azure, you can leverage Microsoft Azure and its infinite scalability for that inactive data set. So if we look at the specific components that make up this solution, as I mentioned, there's two key components. There's the Store Simple hybrid storage array, and at the heart of it, that is an iSCSI SAN that sits in the user data center. And it has all of the components that one would expect from enterprise class storage. So things like active passive dual controller architecture, inline dedupe compression and automatic tiering, tiered storage built into the appliance. So for example, there's tier 1 of flash and tier 2 of SAS, hot swappable fully redundant components. So all of the things that one would expect from enterprise storage. The second major component here, as I mentioned, is the Microsoft Azure Cloud, and presenting those storage blobs as a third tier in this storage array. And the differentiator here is that the Store Simple solution presents that third tier to file servers and application servers and really end users in a seamless fashion. Some of the other components that make up the solution are the Store Simple Manager service. This Store Simple Manager service is a service that runs in Azure, and it is the service that allows you to configure and manage one or multiple devices. So essentially, it's a single pane of glass to managing Store Simple infrastructure. And the other component is listed in the cloud there. It's the SVA, and that's the Store Simple Virtual Appliance. And that's exactly what the name suggests. It's a virtual counterpart to the physical device that runs in Azure that opens up a whole slew of use cases that I'll talk about in the next few slides. So just to get down to some of the speeds and feeds, specifically there are two models available. There is the Store Simple 8100 and the Store Simple 8600. The 8100 provides 15 terabytes of on-premise capacity, 800 gigs of SSD capacity, and it can scale up to 200 terabytes by leveraging the cloud, and that's post-dedupe and post-compression storage, and that's all in a 2U form factor. The 8600, 40 terabytes of visual capacity, scales up to 500 terabytes, and that's in a 4U form factor. And each of these appliances, as I mentioned, is built in an active passive dual controller architecture, and each controller has 4 1-gig ports and 2 10-gig ports. But that's quite a bit of scalability in such a small footprint, right? Especially when you're talking about deduplication and compression. Those 200 terabyte and 500 terabyte numbers that they max out to With if you're achieving 2x dedupe, that's 400 terabytes and a petabyte of data, all in 2U and 4U form factor. So it's quite a bit of scalability and growth. So let's address some of the application and workload focuses for this solution. The workloads are broken into what we call on-premises workloads and Azure workloads. On-premises workloads, by far the most common entry point is the file share use case. Almost every environment out there has a large file share and only a small subset gets accessed very frequently, but all of the data is online and accessible and sitting on-premise on spinning disk. StoreSimple is a perfect fit there because you can provide enough on-premise storage to address that working set and leverage the cloud for that colder stuff, but still keep it all online and accessible to the end users. Archive is very similar. It's essentially the file share use case with an archive application layered on top that will scan a tier 1 location and tier the files over, or tier the data over automatically to the StoreSimple platform. And some of the other use cases are for lower I/O virtual machines, acting as a blob storage for SharePoint installations, and acting as a storage repository for smaller SQL Server instances. Now, earlier I mentioned that StoreSimple virtual appliance. What that allows customers to do and users to do is that when you run a backup, you run a cloud backup and write that to the cloud, you can now leverage the StoreSimple virtual appliance and take that backup and recover it and mount that data to IaaS VMs, so Azure VMs. And that opens up these other workloads like disaster recovery, cloud apps, and dev tests. So for example, just to give you an idea of a use case is, if I have a data set that I back up to the cloud, and then my legal team or my audit, some team wants to audit that data. In a traditional approach, you'd have to spin up a separate environment and restore backups to that and give them access to it. Whereas now, instead of going through the physical hardware requirement, I can just take the data, recover it to virtual machines through this virtual appliance, provide that to the team that wants to look at the data, and it doesn't impact my environment. And then when they're done, I can spin it all down and break it all down so that I only pay for when you use it. So let's talk a little bit about backup and disaster recovery. So with the solution, there's a full-blown data protection toolset that's included. This allows end users to take regular local and cloud snapshots. You can emulate a daily, weekly, monthly type backup strategy. And then those backups, as I mentioned, can be written locally or to the cloud. And then, now because your data is backed up to the cloud, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of where you can recover it. So I mentioned earlier, you can recover it to IaaS virtual machines through that StoreSimple virtual appliance, or that data can be recovered to another appliance in another data center, or even another host within that same data center. There's lots of flexibility there. The tool set adopts a synthetic full type backup approach, so there's lots of efficiencies in both the backup and from a recovery perspective. Because it's a synthetic full, it's a single step recovery operation. So again, there's lots of efficiencies in how data is recovered. And in addition to that, when recovering data from the cloud back to on-premise, there's a lot of smarts built into the solution so that you're not being forced to download all of the data. The metadata is brought back down, you see your files, you see your folder structure, and only when you interact with the files you want are the underlying blocks that make up that file brought back down from the cloud. So let's spend a few minutes and go over the demo that I've gone through, or the tutorial that I've gone through. And these are a subset of a larger number of steps, but I think these are the key ones. So what I've done is I've created a volume that's 1 terabyte in size, named that volume test_vol1. Or actually, let me take a step back and tell you about my environment. So I have a Windows 2012 R2 server connected to a StoreSimple 8100 appliance. and I will actually log in and show you that. But what I've done is I've created a 1 terabyte volume. I presented that volume to the host. It's essentially it's very similar to just adding a raw hard drive to a host. You rescan for storage. It pops up in the disk management window. You mount, initialize, and format the volume. Once I did that, I went ahead and created a backup policy in my in the Azure portal. I created a daily policy, a cloud snapshot to run every day and have a retention period of 32 days, have it start every day at noon. And then what I did is I copied some data to that newly created drive. And then I went back to that policy, and instead of waiting for it to run tomorrow, I ran a manual cloud snapshot. And then once that was completed, I deleted some data and then recovered that data back to the LUN. Okay, so what we're looking at here is this is my Azure subscription, and I've logged in, and in the left pane here you see all of the different Azure services that are available to me. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom here, and I'm going to select Store Simple, and what we're looking at here is the Store Simple Manager service. So before you do anything, you need to create a Store Simple Manager service, and this is that service that I mentioned earlier, that is that single pane of glass and that window into managing and configuring Store Simple appliances in the environment. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm presented with this quick summary page of this service. And what this is it's going to show me things like how to do some quick configuration stuff. And at the top here, I see all these different links, and the one of interest to me is devices. We'll click on devices, and we'll see that under this Store Simple Management Service, there are 2 devices that are configured. The first one is this 8100 device. It's online. There's 2 terabytes of 200 terabytes configured. This is of type device, and the model number is 8100. So this is the Store Simple 8100 device. Right below it is this 1100 device, 100 gigs of 30 terabytes configured. This is that virtual device that I mentioned earlier, and the model number is 1100. So if I click on this, I'm going to drill into the specific information pertaining to my 8100 device. I click on this, I'm presented with a quick summary page now that's within the context of just my 8100 device. And what I want to do is I want to go and look at those volumes that I created. Anytime you want to create a volume, they are created in volume containers. So we'll click on this volume container, and here I see a number of different volume containers that have been created for this device. I'm going to go to this storesim2_vc, and it's in this storesim2 where I created my test vol1, and then right below it is test vol1 clone, and this is the recovery. This is the recovery clone that I did in that recovery operation. Now I'm looking at the Windows Server 2012 R2 host that's connected to this appliance. And specifically the disk management window, you'll see here that we have these 2 drives that are provisioned by the Store Simple device. So we've got one 1 terabyte drive, and this is Microsoft Store Simple 8100 multipath disk device. And right below it, there's another 1 terabyte drive, and it has the same name and description. And what these are is these are that test_vol1 and test_vol1_ clone. And essentially what I did was I created these 2 drives, and the first one I formatted as volume D, and I copied some data to it, and then I deleted. So I initially had copied 6 files and I deleted 3, and then I took I copied 6 files, I took a backup, and then I deleted 3. And then what I did is I recovered that backup, and I performed a clone recovery and mounted that to this host as another drive in drive E. And here you'll see the recovered ELUN with all of the 6 files that were initially copied. And then what I would do, I would just retrieve the files that I want back to here. Then I would get rid of the E drive. That brings me to the end of my tutorial. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that.